audible actually. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Everyone is tired. Yep. Everyone is tired now, so I'll try to finish it off quickly. I would try to bring a notice to this particular famous quotation, a favorite quotation of mine. If we knew what it was we were doing, it would not be called research, would it? The main reason why I have taken up is this, that I have felt this particular thing throughout my whole research career, which started off with a kind of project in immunobiology, then moved on to a particular doctoral thesis on a sulfur chemolithotroph. I shifted to cancer biology, thereafter to particular infectious disease research, and thereafter finally done something on the extremophils. But finally, I found that the main regulatory checkpoints or the most important proteins are what people always try to look for, and they don't find it. And they find, at times they would be like trying to find a kind of needle in a haystack. So they do this, they do that, and then eventually they'll say, okay, this might happen, or okay, this happens. But then a lot of time has passed by. So I find that diseases are obviously quite complex and need to be seriously addressed these days, especially during the era of MDRs, XDRs, TDRs, etc. So I present my talk, Disease Complexity, a Bird's Eye View, wherein I'll be talking of a particular method wherein I'll try to identify indispensable proteins in given a system. It could be a genomic locus, it could be a whole genome, it could be only virulent proteins, whatever. And then I'll try to extrapolate this. I start with one particular set of bacteria, one set of proteins in a particular bacteria, which is Salmonella. Then I'll try to extrapolate that to some other bacteria, maybe say for example, Acinetobacter baumannii, which is threatening emerging infectious disease, causing emerging infectious disease, and yet another which is still not really being talked of much, but having a quite good potential of being a kind of emerging infectious disease as well, which is Edwardsia latarda. So, and I will later on try to see if I can integrate pathways to form signaling networks. Well, the last part generally doesn't fall into the purview of this particular talk, because this is on infectious disease research, and my talk would be only on, I should restrict my talk only on these. So the last part actually goes to the cancer and the Parkinson's disease, where I've also started working upon. So the particular methodology was put up in a particular BMC Bioinformatics as an abstract for a conference. It has come up in Journal of Theoretical Biology as well last year, 2014. And I have put up this particular methodology in a kind of review of mine, which is just accepted in this briefings in bioinformatics. So this particular bacteria, everyone knows, typhoid, Salmonella enterica, the Cereus typhimurium, they are reportedly the bacterial pathogens causing endemic systemic infections like gastroenteritis and typhoid fever. There is a particular another bacteria which initially was thought to be E. coli or Salmonella, but now turned out to be something, not now, quite some time back, maybe some 20 years back, around about 1990s, or a little earlier it was actually found out, but then later on now work has progressed till that far that they have found out that it can even cause humans disease like this, like they can really get infected, and sometimes if not corrected at the right moment, it can be fatal and they will die. So that is the last fish, which is tilapia, having viscous kind of eye, not a transparent one. This is muscular neuropathy, muscular necro. Sorry, I'm not a dealing with fishes and all. But anyways, these are the kind of different kind of diseases associated with this particular kind of fishes, and fishes obviously forms a staple food. The most interesting part of this particular thing is that people generally don't see that the particular fish is infected. So you unknowingly consume fish, and then certain kind of problems with the disease comes up. The symptoms could be like, starts from bloating, goes till vomiting, and even further. And obviously Acinetobacter baumannii, which actually has got a kind of prevalence, as you can see over here, this almost whole of South America, most of the part of China, yes, the whole, and quite a part of Europe as well, with South America, little bit of North America, South America as well. So what I would say is that people, this is a particular two particular figures being taken of to show the kind of seriousness of Acinetobacter infection. It can colonize a respiratory tract, skin, the bloodstream. It can cause pneumonia, UTI, infection of wounds, anything. So, I mean, nosocomial infection is obviously kind of quite alarming these days. So when I started my work, I was trying to see if I can develop a kind of new drug targets for salmonellosis or typhoid. The main reason was that all of the typhoid vaccines which were available till that particular time were either ineffective or highly reactive or moderately efficient, might be having some kind of logistical or safety problems, and sometimes they confer insignificant protection as well. So there was a kind of urgency to find new and specific drugs to combat this particular disease. Now, the thing is that mostly people always used to focus upon this particular type 3 secretion systems in Salmonella. And these were like, this is the two pathogenicity islands actually of these type 3 secretion systems of Salmonella, SPY1 and SPY2. And it's not just that there are two such only. Of these 5 pathogenicity islands, only the type 3 secretion system comprises the first 1 and 2. But then there are other 3 pathogenicity islands developed later on, and which also contributes to the salmonellosis, the infection. Now, what I presume is that it's not about only the virulent proteins that which probably would be quite important, but also how these proteins interact with the environment, as in the gut milieu, as in with the human proteins or whatever. So these 2 component system proteins are quite important, as I understand. Now, these 2 component system proteins are nothing but the signal transduction proteins, which actually are within this particular set of proteins of these pathogenicity islands as well as outside. So it was thought that, okay, these 2 component system proteins might also contribute as to with respect to the virulence of salmonellosis. So this is the whole, like the organism of a genomic locus of Salmonella. And there were like 5 pathogenicity islands, and then there were like 23 response regulators and 25 sensor kinases which were found out from the databases, and we've started our work with that. Now, these 2 component systems, for those people who actually are not having such idea, it's just a quite quick brushing up. It's like it's a kind of simple thing which happens over here. The extracellular comes from the external environment, and then there's a receptor which takes up that the signal transduction happens. And now this, earlier there were like idea that this bacteria would be affected only with one particular protein, but these days the idea has been extended to these 2 particular proteins. One resides in the internal bacterial membrane, which takes up the signal from the environment, and actually the second one, over here, the second one is the response regulator, which is known as its cognate partner. So the histidine kinase takes up with the, over here, histidine kinase takes up this particular signal from the environment with its histidine moiety getting phosphorylated, which is called autophosphorylation, and then the phosphorylation is being transferred, which is called transphosphorylation, and via this the aspartate residue gets phosphorylated. So this cognate response regulator then switches on series of gene transcription, and the output is being given out. Now, there can be several such outputs starting from like these 2 component systems can be used up in several cases. For example, for cell survival, for alteration in metabolic output, for nutrient acquisition, energy metabolism, etc. uptake, and then for differentiation, even cell division, and virulence as well. So this was taken up as a kind of idea to consider all of these 2 component system proteins along with the virulent proteins of the 2 component systems of the Salmonella enterica organism. So I started off my work with obviously the wet lab work. It was a wet lab work, but then moved on to the dry lab because the work demanded so. I really was very curious because instead of finding out which is the most important 2 component system protein which really could be targeted for whatever vaccination, drug, etc., I thought like it's better that I go via the other way around. So it's I took up this particular database which is known as the string database. Now it has got all such data which either can be theoretical purely, or can be taken up from microarray data or experimental data as well, or from literature. So it's a kind of mega database, it's a meta database, sorry. So which actually summarizes all of them and shows the interactions in terms of their proteins. So these are, so for example, if I give a protein as CHY as my query, there will be a lot of interactions coming up. And then what I did is I built up the network of all this spy proteins for this Salmonella. So this is the spy proteins, all spy proteins. I name them as all spy proteins. Now, just because I said that the 2 component system proteins probably could also impart something in there, so I have now added up this 2 component system proteins along with the spy as well. So now this becomes the all spy network, AST. And just to rule out bias, I've taken out AT, I've done another network with the two-component proteins only, two-component system proteins only, taking off the Salmonella proteins, the virulent proteins of the 5 pathogenetic islands. Now, these networks comes under the purview of a particular concept called graph theory, as probably people will be understanding. So I'll just give a quick understanding of it. I'm not really obviously going deeper into that. So if it's a particular graph, as they call over here, it's a graph of just nodes and edges. So proteins are the nodes and the edges are the interactions over here. So this can be given as a particular graph with a connectivity properties, a cyclic or acyclic properties, or they can be directed or undirected. So for our purpose, it's just the connectivity that we are interested in as to how they are interacting with each other. So degree is a particular case wherein a particular protein getting with another particular protein would be of consideration, and the more they are connected, the more the number of degree. Then there would be a particular consideration of to have the particular scale-free network of the particular the scale-free property of the particular network. So this is nothing but that there can be a particular proteins which actually have large number of links. Very few proteins in a real network, very few proteins in a real biological network, very few proteins would be having lot of connections, and very few proteins again would have very less connections. So it is just a kind of this kind of curve with a power law which obeys over here, and this is for our AS, the AST, AS, AT, and AST. So this showed that the whatever network we have built up was really not random, and it was really falling in place. And we have then conducted our analysis with respect to these kind of centralities, like for example, degree centrality, closeness centrality, betweenness centrality, and eigenvector centrality. I'll just quickly have a look on them. Degree centrality is nothing but the number of interactions you have with the protein, as I was already talking about. But the closeness centrality is something as to which shows how well a protein is connected to each other. And then betweenness centrality would be, so for example, there can be a lot of proteins connected, and there would be one particular crucial protein which connects all of them as a kind of hub, right? So eigenvector centrality is now takes up the most important factor over here, wherein it shows that all important proteins are connected to all other important proteins, and that's how eigenvector centrality could be one of the most important factor in determining which is the most important or indispensable proteins in a given network. So I tried my work with respect to that, and I have now analyzed with respect to the eigenvector centrality, obviously not consider the others as well. So these are all SPI proteins separately first done. I have not shown those networks, separate networks as well over here, because it was of not relevance. So SPI 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 were done separately with all this kind of proteins having this ranking. These are the first 10 proteins which in this ranking order with respect to the parametric values which has come up. Now these are for all SPI, these are for all SPI plus TCS, and these are for all TCS. What you can see over here in this case of eigenvector centrality, as I always would like to focus upon only eigenvector centrality, because this is the particular place wherein one protein gets connected with all other, one important protein gets connected with all other important proteins, and that's how, if you would like to target a particular protein for a vaccination or whatever, this should be the one which we would probably be targeting. So if you can see over here, there's one particular protein called INVAF, which is really ranking number 1, and there's a protein over here down which is called SEEK-A. Now if I go back to this particular case wherein I had shown the particular secretion apparatus of the two component systems, the type 2 secretion apparatus of Salmonella, you can see over here that this SEEK-A, this is over here, SEEK, and then this is A, SEEK. So this SEEK over here, SEEK-A, this is SEEK-A actually. So this SEEK-A is the particular protein over here, and then there's INVAF also over here. INVAF is, okay, this is INV and that is IF. So you can, I mean, the color got a little bit changed and all, but then INF actually takes up this color, and then SEEK-A actually takes up this particular color. The color somehow got changed and all, whatever, the code got changed. So what happens is that it is already known, it was known experimentally earlier that INVAF was one of the important proteins, but people still were really not being able to target or rather get a particular drug out of that.
Please come to your conclusions.
Yep. Oh, is it time? Okay. So I'll just quickly finish up. So what I would like to say is that we saw that there were like INVAF proteins coming up in higher numbers in case of these networks, and CK was also coming up as the close connector, competitor. But then what really made them a different one is that we have made a kind of pruning of the network, and then randomly connected the proteins again, and then get the core proteins in the network. So wherein we got that all those proteins which we are finding out over here over here in these cases were also coming up in this case core cases also. Now we have gone for another measure for Cytohubba. There's a particular software which comes up over here. And this particular case has shown that there were like other proteins which are also coming up, but then SIK-A always comes up as the number one over there. Now, we had then gone ahead and we have taken a microarray data, analyzed the gene, constructed the network of those upregulated and downregulated genes. The three different cases were a minus Lakai condition, wherein Lakai, if present, would actually consider a particular bacteria non-virulent or avirulent. It was shown, it has been proven. Salmonella has got no Lakai, so that's why it is pathogenesis. It's a minus Lakai. And so if it is with Lakai, as in E. coli, if Lakai is present, it would be avirulent. And it was shown that just because it is minus Lakai, it is more pathogenic. So if it is more pathogenic, the number of the high ranking of CK goes higher. When it is less pathogenic, the ranking of CK comes down. And when it's downregulated after 4 hours mutant CHI conditions, this particular state, the particular case was that CHI is a particular chemotactic protein which regulates the movement of the bacteria with the flagella and all. So if particular mutant is mutated, flagella is mutated, it is expected that this particular organism would not become avirulent completely, but there would be less virulence, and it was also same the case. So via all this kind of interaction partners and the analysis, we have come to the conclusion that CK has become the kind of, like say, close competitor, and also has become the number one rather of InWave. So finally, all this analysis showed that CK was the most influential protein, along with some other important proteins which has also been reflected experimentally by all other researchers across who are working on Salmonella. So now we actually have built the network. We have analyzed them. We have given a step-by-step approach to find what the important proteins could be there. And we have confirmed them via some macroarray analysis. And then finally, we confirmed that CK was the most important, was the chaperone protein, helps in packaging of InWave also. And once if InWave goes in, then all other secretory proteins also comes in, and as the secretion apparatus was being shown. So now I have extended this particular strategy in Edwards-Hiller tarda. I will not go into details. It actually affects these many organisms, including humans as well. So there are like type 3 as well as type 6 secretion systems coming up, along with 2 chromosomal systems, which I've already started considering in Edwards-Hiller network. And after the consideration of this particular eigenvector centrality, we have found out that the CHI is coming out the most important. And we have gone out further to see whether really CHI can be targeted. So we have seen the immunogenic potential of CHI, and we have found that it is really having good immunogenic, highly immunogenic, at least bioinformatically. Now we are trying to see, trying to clone it, sequence, and then see, and rather we will see for overexpression and see how far protection can be conferred in the fish vaccination. Now this is Acinetobacter baumannii pathogenesis, and we are actually coming up with this MUIR-A, which is a peptidoglycan biosynthetic process cellular cell, which is involved in this particular function. So obviously we can see that MUIR-A has really got some quite importance, and this is also obviously employing the same methodology. So that's how I feel.
You need to conclude.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm just done. This is the last slide. So that's how I actually have concluded that really if you can employ such kind of methodology, all this kind of confusion about taking the most important proteins, which is the indispensable proteins, which is to be targeted, what is to be vaccinated, and like whether a particular drug, if working, what is its target, still not known, and all these confusions can really come to an end. Thank you. So this is my extension for other cancer and Parkinson's disease. So these are the different workers which have worked upon it. Thank you. Yep.
I think we have time for a short question, and then we have to move on.
What are the methods?
Yep.
What are the methods you use to predict immunogenicity?
The thing is, like, it's all not obviously it's bioinformatically done. So there's like some names I've forgotten. Actually, it's like all those modules which have come up. I'm actually trying to employ first bioinformatically, and then now trying to go in the wet lab and then see what is happening. So these are all the methods which are available in the like databases and all.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
And we have a certificate of recognition as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.